Well, hello everybody. Well done for sticking it out to almost the very end. It's a lot of content, isn't it, to sit through? But hopefully we'll finish off, or nearly finish off, with a high on a topic that kind of a lot of people have been talking about. Perhaps through the sense that maybe AI is going to destroy creativity. Maybe it's going to. Or from another perspective, I remember I was talking at Davos a few years ago where we were talking about maybe creativity is the one thing that humans can still do that the AIs won't be able to do. That seems to have been somewhat challenged by the large language models and Gen AI recently. I mean, I think what we're here to talk about is some of the work that's going on to empower creativity through the use of AI tools. And we've got two really cool and interesting companies here and the folks who founded them. And we're going to hear a little bit about them and have a conversation about what the implications to creativity this technology might have. So I'll start off directly on my left is Chloë Ryan, who's an artist, robotics engineer, and creative technologist. And she's the founder and CEO of Acrylic Robotics, which is a tech startup on a mission to widen access to the $70 billion fine art market. And then next on my left is Agi Kajanaku, and she's the co-founder and CTO of OpenStudio. And while studying computer science and AI at Harvard, Aggie and her brother Kor started experimenting with building AI-native design tools. And then Kor Kajanaku is a designer and the co-founder and CEO of OpenStudio, which is a company advancing design into the AI age by equipping designers with technologies to create at the speed of thought. And that's one of the topics that we'll definitely be talking about a little later. So what we're going to do is we're going to show a little demo of each of these applications. The first one, we're going to start with Acrylic Robotics, and then we'll have a little conversation about it. Then we'll do the same for OpenStudio, and then we're going to have a more general conversation about this technology, about some of the applications. So if we could roll the Acrylic Robotics video, please. Well, thanks. So, Chloë, tell us a little bit about why. Why did you start Acrylic Robotics? Why did you decide to work on this problem?
Yeah, I think that's the question that I usually get when I tell people what I do, which is build painting robots. I mean, for me, this all started, I started it as an artist, so I've been making and selling my own work since I was an early teenager. And I just became very frustrated with a few things when trying to sell my artwork. The first one was that it would take me weeks or sometimes months to make a particular piece, and then I would only be able to sell it to one person one time. As a teenager, I might sell my artwork, my paintings, for $200 or $300, and I was very excited.
Good as a teenager.
I know.
I can't sell my artwork for that much now.
I would buy one from you for $200 to say I've got a piece by you. But and I did the math, and I was like, I'm making $2 or $3 an hour, right, which was fine as a hobby. But I said, how would I actually make a living doing this? And the answer was, oh well, you have to participate in the gallery system. That's how it works in art. So restrict, VIP this, VIP that. And you have to, increase the value of your works, make them more scarce, and sell it to these high net worth individuals for thousands of dollars, and then eventually tens or hundreds of thousands a piece. And that just didn't really resonate with me. I said, my goal as an artist is to broaden access to my work. I want as many people to be able to enjoy it as possible. And if I looked at a lot of other creative industries like writing, I'm an author, I write a book, and everybody can read it because of the printing press and then digital publishing and distribution and whatnot. And those art forms are valued based on how good is this, how many people resonate with it, and not based on scarcity. So that was the initial unlock for me, and then I also became, and then I studied robotics. So
of course you did,
yeah,
as a painter. Yeah, obvious.
As one does. But so that was sort of the unlock for me in going, nobody has built this yet, but I believe that it's possible, and I want to bring this into the world. And then the last piece is, I was selling my works, and there was a large market for custom works, or the buyer wants to play a role in the creation process. And a lot of times people were saying, hey, I want the subject matter in the style of this artist, and it wasn't even in my style, right? And so I am so interested in all of these Gen AI art creation tools, but I think that they're capped because right now we can't bring them to life in the way that art really is meant to be brought to life with physical materials. And so I'm very interested in how can we bridge the gap between those new creation tools and physical art making, and bridge that gap. And anyways, that's a little bit about the why behind building acrylic.
Very cool. And so we can think of this as if you like, as a production process, right? It's the way you make and maybe make it scale. But is that the limit of it, or do you see it going further than that? Do you see it changing the nature of the art itself? Has it done that for you?
I think with any new technology in art creation, or in anything, broadly speaking, but I think that we need to first match what art looks like. So for us, that means, can we hit parity with existing art pieces? And I think, as I see artists begin to use our tools, that's what I see a lot of artists doing is, can I have this look as similar as possible to my existing art pieces, such that I can use it as a production tool? And I think that as soon as we are consistently able to hit parity, then we will open up a lot of opportunities for using this as a truly novel creative tool. In the same way that digital art inherently is different from physical painting or traditional art making, because it's a new tool. I think that there will be all sorts of novel applications. We've begun to see little pockets of these and artists getting really creative and using the tool in unexpected and surprising ways, which I'm sure that you've had as well on your platform. But I really think that we are just beginning to see the first traces of that.
Yeah, but I was fascinated just by watching that robot put brush strokes on a canvas, and I started to think, well, that's almost like a performance. Maybe we'll start getting performance painting as well. I mean, who knows where it could go? But it does seem to me that tools, the art and the tool, have such a kind of intimate connection, and so surely introducing a new tool is going to change the art.
Yeah, I think a really interesting analogy that I like to give is, when the camera was first invented. Well, first of all, we weren't even thinking about film yet, right? Like it was not necessarily a perfect connection. And even once we started to use the eventually, recording devices to film theater, it was, I'm going to put the camera here and I'm just going to take a video of what's going on stage. And it took nearly a century for visual media and the way that we communicate through this new tool, i.e., a camera and video editing, for us to develop visual language around what does it mean if I have a shot over someone's shoulder, and it allowed for the creation of all of these new categories of art, and you would not have been able to predict it.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to it a little later about how these technologies often the first reaction is that they're dumbing down the art form rather than elevating it, and then later they do. But we're going to come back to that in a second. So, you're a roboticist, so you build robots. Are we going to see these robots in every artist's studio, or are they just going to be so expensive that that's never going to happen? What do you foresee?
I would love to see this be an important part of any artist's art making process, right, if they so choose to make art that exists and is embodied in physical format. Whether or not each artist will actually physically have a robot in their studio, we'll see. Even with printmaking, for example, only select artists are able to purchase a high-end photo printer. But that doesn't mean that they can't make prints. And so the actual mechanics of that we'll see. But conceptually, I view this being an important thing that gets taught in art schools and that artists learn when they learn new tools.
I was visiting a research lab in Japan recently, a kind of an art and design research lab, and they're experimenting with using robots a little bit like yours to recreate crafts, because the craftspeople are dying out of Japan, right? And they're not training, and the new ones aren't necessarily coming along. So they were building these robots to apply plaster work in the way that they've traditionally done in Japan, and other kinds of physical things. That it feels. I mean, I can imagine all kinds of like plays on materials and things that might happen eventually.
100%.
Yeah, brilliant, good. All right, well now we're going to take a look at the video for OpenStudio, and then we'll have a little conversation about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about this sort of technology as a whole. So if we could roll the OpenStudio video, please. So nice little ad for Nike there. That's great. So Aggie, Kor, tell us a little bit about why you decided to work on this. And I mean, you talked a little bit about, well, at least in your intro, I was talking about you started to experiment with these models, but what was driving you to build this tool?
Sure. I can start us off. Prior to OpenStudio, I was in grad school focused on computer vision and AI, and I was showing like what's going on in generative AI space, and like showing them more early models like Dolly, and Kor, you can take it from here.
Sure. I mean, like I saw it, and I was like any good designer, I like refused it immediately. I thought it was kind of shit, and I told Aggie everything I hated about it. And then a few weeks later, Aggie came back with a model that was editable. That was the first thing that I really thought might be useful. And then I was still at IDEO, so I started using the model that Aggie built for some of our client projects. And it was cool to move much faster. So work that would take me hours in Photoshop, I could do pretty quickly, as you saw in the demo reel. And then I think we went home for Thanksgiving, and I had a long list of other feature updates for Aggie, and we started building it as a side project. But it's basically the design tool that I've always wanted as a designer myself. And that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to put an entire design studio in the hands of every designer out there.
So I've always been fascinated, and we were touching on it with Chloe, but fascinated about the relationship between ideas and tools. And you know, I think this is it's a critical relationship, and the right tools amplify our creative ideas and make new ideas possible. But maybe, and we can think about if you go all the way back to the paintbrush or the pencil, you know, that they made certain kinds of mark making possible, which led in all kinds of interesting directions. Maybe just the same way that Chloe's robots are doing. Whereas the wrong types of tools can slow the process down. They can sort of disassociate the idea from the execution of the idea. And if I were to be critical of some of the design tools, digital design tools we've had for the last couple of decades, they've kind of done that a little bit because they're so complex to use. And you talk about sort of designing at the speed of thought. Mm-hmm. And so it really is it's the use of the tool as much as the power of the tool that's important, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And again, I think there's this conversation that you can then start having with AI as an additional designer. So even the way that we've made it so that you can work in OpenStudio, it's much more conversational and not prompt-based. So the prompts that you're typing are normal questions that you might ask a designer, or normal directions that you might give another designer that you're working with. I mean, I think of image generators in general as like vending machines for food, and then what we're really trying to do is think about more like, if you're a chef, how do you work with this technology and direct it in the way that you need to produce that final work that you want to produce as a designer?
Yeah. And also staying within that same tool set the whole way through. I mean, mm-hmm. the fact that you can go from initial ideation to printing something out at the end is not something we've ever had in the design studio in the past. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about where this is all going to go. I mean, the technology, is there something special about the way that we're using AI here, Aggie, that we've not seen used before?
Yes, so basically with our models that we've implemented, we are really thinking about like the user and how we can meet people where they are in terms of how they want to interact with AI. So how they can communicate and how the models can better serve the users. So the way that we've trained our models is to really take that into consideration and to prioritize those needs and to work with the data in a way that is in the best interest of allowing people to really interact and fine-tune their assets.
And I sort of want to take that almost a little step further and bring everybody together to talk about this next, which is that relationship between the tool and the creator has always been important, right? And then, so I'm wondering how you're all thinking about that. How are you thinking about you know, a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the conversation about some of these models and our use of them in creativity is that we're kind of exploiting creative people rather than necessarily empowering them. And just sort of wondering how you're all thinking about that with the tools that you're building.
Yeah, I can start. So that's been really important to me as a designer. Most of the people who are using the platform are friends of mine or soon to be friends of mine. And I don't want to exploit anyone. So it starts with the models. We've trained our models to understand geometry rather than existing images. So when you understand geometry, then you can build entirely new images that aren't exploiting other people's work. And then it also starts with not training on the designer's data that they're giving us. So we've spent a lot of time thinking through the legal implications of what does it mean for somebody to put their creative assets on our platform. And so we're trying to make sure that we give them full rights and we don't train on any creative's work. I think in the future, we might consider working with organizations that want to give us data. But unlike every other AI company, we will require them to pay for us to take their data as a way for them to train their own models on OpenStudio. Otherwise, we will never train on other people's data effectively.
Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, similar responses here. Like, I think I sort of quote the 3 C's. So consent, first and foremost, if you're going to train on someone's data, like has been central to your thesis, your ethos. Credit where credit is due, and compensation. So we think a lot about how are we compensating the creator of the art that gets realized by us, or how are we compensating the artists whose styles have been used ethically with consent and with credit. And I think, more broadly, earlier today we were chatting and you introduced me to this idea of idea versus execution, and like exactly what you were saying earlier in this talk around how so many of our greatest ideas are often limited by execution. And people often ask me, is this not the death of art, or the death of art as we know it, the death of a painter? And I go, to me, it's just another creative tool. And I don't think that creativity and execution are the same thing. I think people often conflate them.
Yep.
And for me, this is easing, it's easing creative expression, and I think that it's going to allow for us to see all sorts of new art from new people also who might not have the tools to learn, 10 years of fine art, for example.
We're kind of out of time, but I want to squeeze one last question in, but I'm going to have to ask you to all be quick. I'll ask you all to answer. It's like, so where's all this going in the future? If you kind of dream about where these technologies and these tools might take the creative process, might take creativity, might take artistry, what are you thinking? Chloe, I'll let you start. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, that's OK. I think that the beauty of it is that no matter what I say, anything that I say today is not going to come true. And
Good answer.
Like I think it's important to realize, and that's where the art is, right? Like I have no idea, and it's the role of artists. Maybe they aren't artists as we know them today, who have spent again 10 years learning color theory. Maybe that execution skill is not going to be required, but tomorrow's creatives, like whenever a new tool is invented, it leaves all sorts of space for new ways of creating and new forms of art, new art movements to come through. And I think that, if creatives in the audience, or we are going to see the birth of all sorts of new creative forms, and it's not going to be me on stage telling artists what to do with it.
Aggie.
Yes, so I think with AI, we can help users ideate and go through different ideas at a faster pace. But I think also down the line with other emerging fields in augmented reality and in brain-computer interface, these will open up new paradigms to allow people to be creative in different ways than we can predict right now.
Very cool. Kor?
I'm just going to say it really quickly. I think there will be billions of artists and designers in a very short amount of time. So I think maybe by the end of the decade, most of humanity will be practicing some form of creative art form, design form for most of their day.
Well, that's a very exciting thought. I love that idea. Well, Chloë, Aggie, Kor, thanks so much. I'd encourage you all to take a look at their tools and look at the things that they're building. But yeah, thank you. Thank you all.